Hi everybody, this is part 2 of my 2x72 grinder. I put a screw here. It's going to hit this hole in the center of this wheel, and then I'm going to just keep turning it with my belt sander. Hopefully this would be round. This is the tracking wheel that I'm doing. Here I'm gluing the 3-piece together. I'm going to put this on the drill. Like I said, I don't have a lathe, so this kind of a homemade lathe for now. I'm just clamp my drill onto the workbench. Here I'm sanding it. You're gonna see the problems I'm gonna have later on. So here's the bolt. I managed to find the bolt, the scrap bolt, and tightening it and everything. I've ordered the belts. I order ceramic belts, but they didn't come in yet, so I have to use a string. So I measured a 72-inch string, and here I'm gonna have to dry fit everything together so that I know where to mount and where to screw everything on so that it's gonna fit the belt. And it's just clamped together right now, and hoping that everything should be able to align before I screw the frame together. And it's kind of hard working without the belt in my actual hand, but this will have to do with COVID-19. The deliveries were really slow. Here's the hole that I put for the nut that I'm going to put here, so that I could put the bolt through this piece of wood, and then that bolt's going to be pushing the hinge up and down so that I could track the belt. Unfortunately, I didn't have a bit that was the right size for this nut. It was either way too small or way too big, so I made a big hole, and then I had to epoxy the nut in. Here I am drilling the frame together, and here's pretty much put together. The belts arrive, as you can see. That's an on-off switch. Here is the other side, and a lot of people, they don't show you. This is what happens when you try to put something together sloppily. Without a good drill press, is that everything is a little wobbly and it's prone to falling off. And this happened for a day or two, and I try to iron out the bugs and try to adjust it a little bit, because any of these wheels, if they're slightly off, it's not going to track. Since my motor only has the fastest speed and it doesn't even have any slow speed for me to adjust it slowly. It's I think 3,600 RPM right off the start. So now I think, oh, it might work. It worked for a while. Unfortunately, it's not going to work. So it seemed to work, but only for now. The problem was many things, but for starters, because of COVID-19, I cannot go to, or at least I don't want to go to the store. This is the biggest hinge that I have for my scrap. So really, this hinge is not sufficient. You need something like a door hinge, the thickness and size, so that it would work. This is way too small of a hinge. I have no choice. I don't want to go to the store because of COVID-19, so this is what I had to work with. So that was going to be the tracking wheels hinge. Also, the problem with this is I've used these bearings here that are skateboard bearings. Okay, so the skateboard bearings, problem is that the hole for the skateboard bearing is quite small, this hole. So the only thing I can put is this bolt that is quite thin. And what happens is, because of this bolt being thin, because this hole being small, this size is really way too thin for any stability, because it's just going to be held on at one spot. So the problem with this was that when it was held up like that, it was prone to go offline because it would bend. Even though this was welded on, this would bend this way, up, down, backwards, simply because I shouldn't be using the skateboard bearing because the hole's too small. And then on top of that, trying to seat this bearing into the wood, I don't have the right drill bit, because the drill bit that I have, if you could see, this is not the one, but as you can see that this here comes down like that. This drill bit comes down. So when I drill the hole into this piece of wood, what happens is the bearing is not going to sit well in the wood. So when I drill the hole's going to be like this, and this is the wheel. So the hole being in this shape, I'm exaggerating a little bit. When I put the bearing in, the bearing is not going to sit well with all this extra space here. This jaggedy space inside. The bearing didn't sit well at all. And then I didn't have also a drill bit that was the good size. So there was extra space here, as you can see. I had to put so much glue here, and even so it glued in, it wobbles when it turns, simply because these things are not perfectly seated, and it's not, both of these are not perfectly seated. Even though I've lathed this and made it as round as I can, but when it turns, it just kind of, you know, it just wobbles a little bit, if you could see. And I couldn't make this steady because these are not seated well. So this is a tracking wheel, and if your tracking wheel is wobbly, for sure your belt is not going to track well. So that's the problem with doing it on my own with just hand tools. Then after, I mean, it ran, but even when I shut it off and I started again, it would take me like 5 minutes to get it up and running again, to track again, because it was so wobbly that it was only by chance that it started to run and track without the belt falling off. So I thought that would work for a while, but what happens is that the wheel ceased on me. This wheel at the bottom of the wheel at the bottom, because it didn't have a bearing. The bottom takes the most pressure, the bottom wheel, and then it heated up, and then I think the heat just melted the rubber. I think these wheels melt easy because they're kind of like rubbery a little bit. So this one turns. This was the top one, and this one doesn't turn now because it heated up and doesn't turn anymore. So at this point, I have to scrap all the time making into this. This is now completely useless, and these wheels also completely useless. So at this point, I had to go to plan B and plan C. So here are the plan B wheels. They didn't seem to work because some parts of the wheel is thin and the other parts of the wheel is kind of thick. So that kind of made a tracking problem, and it just kept flying off once again. So I had to switch to Plan C wheels, and these wheels are a bit rusty, and they're like 15 years old. A very strange thing happened. This wheel got melted. As you can see, this is bulged out. I tested it just for a few minutes, and I saw that the wheel was crooked and it's melted right here. The bearing here is one of them is good. There's two. There's one on this side and there's one on the other side. This one is good. This one is seized. Doesn't look like it's turning. This one doesn't turn. It's kind of stuck. I think what happens is that it somehow this bearing got seized, and then since it got seized, it started slowing down, and it generated a lot of heat because it's doing a lot of friction rather than turning and spinning. So when it was doing a lot of friction, it started to heat up, and when this thing gave way and the ball bearings were not working properly, it's just creating heat as it grinds inside. And when it's creating a lot of heat, then it just caused this wheel to bubble up. So you can see the insides all kind of like, you know, melted and whatnot as well. So I'm going to try another wheel. If that fails, I have another skateboard that I can sacrifice that I don't really use. And there's 4 more wheels on that skateboard. And then if really all else fails, then I'll run out and spend, you know, $100 or whatever to buy a set of actual aluminum wheels for grinders. At this point, I'm going to try out all my options since this option is free. So it's all nice and painted and finished. Hopefully this wheel won't burn out on me, the bearings. So because I only have a very small hinges, I couldn't just have a little bolt that attached to the hinges, because they're so small, they're not powerful at all. So I have to make the hinges this way so that it just goes up and down on it. And then when this comes down, these 2 pieces of wood would also hold this thing in place. So this thing will not be turning this way. And because it's just sitting on this bolt here, so this thing wouldn't really be wobbling at all now. And here's to adjust the tracking would be fine. And I also just built a slot here, because this is only held on with 1 screw. With this slot, it has nowhere to go. This arm will just pivot within the slot. And obviously I have a spring at the bottom, and I also have a spring here on the top. And that actually seems to do the trick. A lot of times though, I do have to micromanage this because sometimes this does go out of whack and then it doesn't track. So every once in a while I have to tighten this so that and adjust it so that it wouldn't go out of whack and then mistrack the belt. So far it's still working. This one does get a little bit hot, so I have to watch out. I won't run this for more than 4 to 5 minutes. After 5 minutes I would turn it off and let it cool down, because these old skateboard bearings could be rusty and it could fail again at any time, like the old wheel that I had. So for now it seems to work very, very well.